And welcome once again to the SpartanMag.com V-Cast, brought to you by JFQ Lending. Paul Konyndyk, Jim Comparoni, Breslin Center for the last time this season, 2021 basketball season. It's been a crazy journey, roller coaster ride, but the roller coaster thrill ride ended with all smiles for Michigan State fans today. 70-64, your Michigan State Spartans. Huge victory over Michigan, number 2 ranked Michigan. Michigan State finishes the season 15-11, 9-11 in the Big Ten. Those numbers look nice and safe for the NCAA tournament. Now, Michigan State, as you guys well know, 3 gigantic wins over teams ranked in the top 5 in the last 12, 13 days when they absolutely had to have them, delivering Tom Izzo style, Aaron Henry playing Michigan State style, Rocket Watts coming through with a huge game, Langford with maybe the biggest shot of his career. Amazing day for Michigan State basketball. Big win over the Wolverines. Paul Konyndyk, how did it look from your seat?
I mean, yeah, you can keep on going. Joey Hauser driving to the basket. Gabe Brown hitting some of the biggest free throws of the season. I mean, with nobody on the line. I don't just watching Gabe Brown to go to the free throw line. That has to be one of the worst things you could do is you sit there at the free throw line trying to hit free throws and there is nobody but opposing teammates on the, lined up from you to the basket. And him hitting 4 straight free throws when it mattered and getting rebounds. I mean, every guy contributed in this game, and I think that's kind of the big takeaway for for Michigan State in this game. I mean, you think of like a guy like Jack Hoiberg playing 7 minutes off the bench. No one, Izzo indicated that he could play a little bit, but I mean, nobody expected him to play. The minutes he did and play at a fairly good level. And I mean, just everybody finding a way to contribute. And some guys just doing things that you didn't expect him to, like Malik Hall. We've seen him struggle with his shot throughout the season. He hits that 3 to start the game. That's a big, that's his only bucket of the game, but that's a big bucket. And then, Marcus Bingham, 8 big rebounds. I mean, these are all things that you thought maybe it was in there somewhere, but for them to do that, and then you see a guy like Julius Marble playing as firm as he did, and he had a couple big rebounds today. There's a lot of guys doing a lot of things today, and it was really a team win, and it had to be when you play really good when you play really good teams and top 5 opponents. You can't get it done with 3 guys playing well or just 2 guys carrying the scoring load. You have to have everybody doing their part, and everyone did their part today for Michigan State, and it was a huge win.
Hauser and Watts, difference makers, playing more like what many people expected them to play like this year. And the team is different, obviously, when those 2 guys are hitting. Langford to the foul trouble, came through big at the end. Izzo says he still doesn't seem to have his legs under him. But the rest of the guys, Paul Konyndyk, the 1 extra day of rest. Instead of playing a 1-day prep like they've been doing 3 of their last 4 games, they got an extra day of practice, extra day of rest. And that was key for Bingham to play the way he did. I've never seen him as light on his feet and quick with his hands, like on when he missed that dunk and then gathered the rebound, put it back up and in for an and one. Just the quickness to the ball, the hands to finish.
Yeah.
I mean, he's maturing in a lot of ways, but the maturation is coming around, and then they get a little bit of rest, and then boom, the reset button, and across the board, Hauser, Watts, Bingham, all better. And Henry better than he was the other night in a lot of ways. Langford still struggling through some things, but Watts made some shots. But I thought not just Bingham, other guys. Michigan State was winning loose balls today. They won rebounding 38-32, deflections, loose balls, hungry to the ball. Having their backs to the wall is part of it, but just a little bit more rest helped them. The last time we saw this team reasonably rested was probably the Illinois game. Then after that,
For sure.
it's just been they've just been running suicides ever since then. Game after game after game. Now they get a rest, and I'm not sure how good they're going to be next week. They might be pretty darn good. I don't know if they've got a roster that can win 3 games in 3 days or 4 games in 4 days, whatever it is. But now we're back to talking about the tournament and what's best in terms of getting ready for the NCAA tournament, like old times. Paul talking about the NCAA tournament and what to do in the Big Ten tournament. They're playing Michigan in the second game if they beat Maryland. So my old standby is to win 1, lose 1, go home, get rest. That would be best for this team on paper, but in actuality, you don't want to lose to Michigan. If you beat Maryland, But it's nice if you're a Michigan State basketball fan to get back to thinking about the big dance. And we can argue about what's better in the Big Ten tournament and all those things. But these guys deserve it. I felt so good for Aaron Henry, felt so good for Joshua Langford. And both of those guys were not congratulating themselves. They felt great for Rocket Watts.
Yeah, that was really a kind of cool thing. Aaron Henry intimating that, like there was times where they could have run plays for him, but they wanted plays to be run for Rocket Watts, and you could just tell the difference in Rocket Watts' body language. He doesn't usually get a lot of rebounds, and tonight he had 3 or 4 rebounds, and that might not seem like a lot, and it really isn't. But he had a little bit of extra gear getting in there. Where guys like Bingham were cutting out. That's one of the things tonight. It's not just like rebounds. It's like guys are cutting out and other guys are swooping in there and getting them. I mean, it was like the little things. And
loose balls.
Yeah, and that's
50 balls. Yeah.
that's what you don't get when you're tired. I'm telling
Absolutely.
you, because like a guy like Bingham who's like a giraffe.
Absolutely.
With those long legs, it's hard for a guy that size with that kind of length to get on the floor.
Sure.
But he got after it tonight. Gabe Brown getting some really good rebounds. And I'll say
Hauser was battling better than usual.
Hauser was the guy Hauser's the guy that looks like he's been dog tired for the last, that the schedule's caught up with him. Just looking tired, and guys driving around him. And this is a Michigan team that there's some guys on there that drive quite a bit. But I just feel like I do feel like Michigan State, they've gotten used to playing a grinded out schedule, but so when you're used to that dogged schedule, then you get an extra day and you actually feel it. So I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen when they get tomorrow off, and when they get to play a Maryland team that they only basically had 1 day prep for. Maryland had 5 days for them. So now,
ridiculous.
Are you going to see what Michigan saw for Michigan State tonight? A Michigan State team that knew what they could do, or what Michigan was going to try to do, and there's that knowledge factor, and that's what Michigan State didn't have against Maryland last time, and I'm really eager to see. So how can Michigan State attack this Maryland team to see if that carries over with Rocket Watts? How Marcus Bingham continues to play, because if you remember, that Maryland team is a matchup problem for some of Michigan State's bigs. This is going to be, it should be a game where guys like Hauser and and Marble and maybe Hall, those guys have to play a lot, because Maryland's all a bunch of 6'7" guys. So can Michigan State make some adjustments, use the bigs that are playing well? Because if you remember last time, I think it was Bingham, Kithier, and I forget who else, but Michigan State's regular and Marble, I think they combined for like 9 minutes in that game. So it'll be interesting to see how Michigan State handles that. The Josh Langford thing, he's got to get his legs back, and that'll be another interesting thing. Izzo mentioned after practice, or after the game tonight, that he's just not going to practice him, and that might not be a bad idea. Josh Langford doesn't need to be taking a ton of practice reps.
I think it just means for 1 day.
I think he does. I think he does too. But he's going to want to try to. But he's going to, after that 1 day off, he's going to try to load manage him, and that's good for Watts. It's good for Gabe Brown. They can use as many reps as they can use. You don't need to over rep Josh Langford right now.
I guess they only have 1 day, because they'll take Monday off, and then they'll practice on Tuesday. If they give Josh off on Tuesday, they're traveling on Wednesday. So I guess there's only 1 day.
Yeah, but they'll probably do some sort of walkthrough type thing.
Well, yeah, when they travel on Wednesday, right, they'll practice here, and they'll probably shoot around there.
It's interesting, because it's a fresh type deal for them too. There'll be a lot of carryover, because there's going to be their Maryland team is tough to prepare for, but I think once you see them again, it's a little bit easier. And I'm not sure Maryland's playing as well right now, as they were. Remember, they were fresh as a daisy, facing Michigan State, and
that was their biggest game of the year. Probably they had to have that one, and they got it. They played well.
Yep. And now you look at the standings. Michigan State is technically, they're tied with Maryland in the standings. Maryland's got the 8 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Michigan State's got a slightly better record, which just seems crazy right now when you look at where they were a few games ago. But 15-11, I think Maryland is what 15-12.
Something
or are they
like
both?
that.
Yeah, but anyways, they're both 9-11 in the Big Ten. So
if you're a Michigan fan, I mean, would you want to play Michigan State again?
I wouldn't. But here's the thing: if I was a Michigan fan right now, I would want I wouldn't want to play them. It's the same thing that Michigan State's been in when they've had to play Michigan early in the tournament.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you'd
you're
you'd
talking
ra-
about you're
you,
trying to put yourself in the mind of a Michigan fan.
no because
A Michigan fan thinks they can, in
no, no, no,
football,
no, no. Because they're looking at the big picture, just like Michigan State would have. They've got a guy in Eli Brooks who twisted his ankle tonight. Franz Wagner might have twisted his ankle a little bit. I want my guys. If I think that I got a legit chance to win a national championship, last thing I want is guys out there that have injuries playing against a rival. It's going to be a brutal game. And then the thing that I've always noticed, covering the Big Ten tournament over the years, is that Friday game. If you have sat out, if you have sat out and you've had to bye till Friday, and you play the Thursday game, and it's usually a decent team, a pretty good team. In Michigan State is a pretty good team right now, but a pretty good motivated team. That's the hardest game of the week to play until you get to maybe the championship. But that Friday game, if you're a high seed, like Michigan is a number one seed, a number two seed, that Friday game is always the toughest, in my opinion.
How about the confidence, the mentality of Michigan State's players now? I mean, Aaron Henry's talking about he wants to go to Indianapolis, win that tournament, stay there, and win another one. He's
Yeah.
been on. This is his third year in
The,
the program. He's been to a Final Four as a freshman. Last year they were thinking Final Four at this time 365 days ago before it was unplugged. He's expecting that, and I
yeah.
think he's excited about the players developing around him. They still have the point guard problem, but the confidence after they've gone through all these 3 top 5 wins, they feel like they can beat anybody. I don't know if they can, but don't tell them that because they're starting to think they can.
Well, when I started looking at Michigan State's roster and some of the personnel on there, and you start comparing it with some of the other teams that I've thought have been a little bit flawed going in,
Mhm.
you look at the 2016 team was so freshman laden. This team, to me, has got a lot more pieces than that team does because that team lacked depth. They didn't have anybody inside.
Remind me
Any
what that team ended up doing.
that team ended up losing. They beat who did they beat? They beat Miami in the first round of the
Okay,
NCAA
yeah,
tournament, and then they lost to Kansas.
yeah. They were
Remember
like
that they
they
had
were like
Kenny Goins and Nick Ward as the big men.
yeah,
So
that
Michigan,
was an 11-8 game, wasn't it? Michigan State was, I mean, 11-7. Wasn't Michigan State 11 in that game?
I can't
Miami
remember.
was like, I don't know if it was a 9-8. I think Michigan State, it might have been an
I want to say it
11-7,
was either a 10-7 or
10-7. That
a
10-7. That's what I
10-7
mean.
or a
Yeah,
9-8. But
10-7. Yeah,
that was a decent Miami team. I just feel like this Michigan State team, even though they have the flaws, they've already shown that they can beat 3 top 5 teams. So
sure.
I mean, it's like okay, so like that. Go back to that Miles Bridges freshman, Josh Langford freshman year team. There isn't a time that I felt like in that season, and there were some good teams in the Big Ten. Purdue was really good that year. When Michigan State played the really good teams in the conference, they had no shot. I mean, they really had no shot. This is a different
Right.
Michigan State team. So I think this Michigan State team, though flawed, is a little bit more like the Denzel Valentine junior year team that kind of squeaked into the tournament. They had that disappointing loss in the Big Ten tournament. They were kind of running through that. Then they threw one away against Wisconsin. Everyone gave them up for dead. And then they made that tournament run to the Final Four that year. That was a shock. I'm not saying Michigan State's going to make a Final Four run this year. What I am saying is that this Michigan State team has more pieces, so you're capable of making a deeper run if you get the right breaks, if you get the right schedule, all the things fall in line, as opposed to the ceiling being really low because you just don't have enough bodies. This team has bodies. They just have to have guys do some things they haven't done yet, aka Rocket Watts needs to continue to develop as a point guard, and
I mean,
that's not outside the realm of possibility.
right. I mean, and with Watts, I mean, they were coming down the stretch today trying to hold on to that lead, and Michigan kept making a 3-pointer here, 3-pointer there, looking competitive, like they're going to make a run at it. It was scary for Michigan State, and maybe not for the players, but for fans. There for a minute, I kept posting on the live in-game thread. I'm like, if you're Michigan State, what do you do at point guard now? There's 3 or 4 minutes to go. Do you stick with Watts, who's having a great game, or do you go back to what you've done when you've closed out against Ohio State, Indiana,
You go,
and Illinois, and go Henry at point guard? They stuck with Watts, but they didn't really have to run a lot of offense in the last minute because it was all free throws. So Michigan State, that's still a frontier they've not
yeah.
figured out. Like in a crunch time situation, if Michigan State's down a point or down 2 points with 3 minutes to go, do they stick with Watts? I don't know if they've
I don't think
progressed.
so.
Probably not. They've not progressed to that. They're still trying to figure things out. I always like to say 30 games get your crap together. They've only played 26. They need 4 more games theoretically. I mean, they don't. I'm joking. In some ways they do, but they're still working through those things. And Aaron Henry made a couple of big plays at the end, like he has all year. And interior defense was getting better when they played Illinois against Coburn,
Yeah.
when they played Ohio State with the big men that they had. and it's carried over. That first game against Dickinson, he played pretty well, but Michigan State made it tough on him in some ways. They made it very tough on him today with Michigan State's rotation of big men, and Michigan State going over the ball screens and and getting help from the big man for a stunt help here, and then recovering. They did that well in the first game, even though Michigan shot a good percentage in the first half. And then, as I wrote earlier in the week, when Aaron Henry got that second foul, and I said that to you prior to the game today, and I think I've said it on the radio show earlier this week. I might have written it also, but Aaron Henry, when he had that second foul, the flagrant foul in the first game against Michigan on Tuesday, if he hadn't gotten that foul, I think Michigan State would have been leading that game at halftime. They were making a run. Dickinson was sitting. Michigan State was starting to do some matchup isolation thing with a power forward mismatch situation, side ball screen, having a lot of success with it. I don't think Michigan State would have won the game, but they would have been leading at halftime. And the thought of winning this game might not have seemed as preposterous. Everybody knows what happens: an 11-point lead, back to 7, then to 10. And then, as I wrote, it was at 10 points when Michigan State started going under ball screens. They went big and started going under ball screens, probably just to see if it would work. You're down 10 and change it up for the sake of changing it up. That's when Michigan had all these open 3-pointers and the lead exploded. They didn't do that at all today. They did it 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever it was. Learned from it. That's one of the benefits when you play someone back to back. The losing team makes more of the adjustments. Michigan State went under a ball screen once. I think Malik Hall went under one once, and Wagner hit a 3-pointer. Maybe it was Livers only one time, and Izzo threw a fit about it. That's not how we're playing it, but it's very subtle. But when Michigan made their big explosive run in the second half, Michigan State was playing a style of defense that they did not play today. So if they play again in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament or whatever it's called, whenever that is, Friday, that'll be
that's quarters.
But Michigan State getting over the ball screen and the stunt help recovery communication has been pretty good. And Michigan's a very good screen roll team. They devastate teams with that. They never quite got that going in either of these two games. A couple of times in that first game, Mike Smith hit a couple of bounce pocket passes to the rim and scored one or two. But it got to the point where late in the game in this one, Michigan, instead they went away from the ball screen action with Dickinson and just tried to flat out post entry to him and got it down there and missed one, drew a foul once. They were changing up what they were trying to do. Michigan State interior defense inside out is what enabled them to win this game today. That part of it was no fluke at all.
Yeah, and I felt like with that Julius Marble set the tone early with some of his physicality. I mean, I got to say that, like I've said this since last year, because he's had so little, because he's been injured throughout his career, he really hasn't had a chance to go learn post defense in terms of not getting moved from spots. And he's gotten so much better over the course of the year of not giving up ground and doing it, without fouling, using that forearm, but not two hands on a guy. And he's gotten so much better at that. And it's really kind of a nice luxury to have if you can do that with Marble. And then you can bring a guy like Mahdi off because he's also firm. And I thought, even though he played maybe a minute or two tonight, even when they tried to post him, they couldn't necessarily. And then then you bring Bingham in, and it's like a eye changer. It's like it's like seeing a left-handed pitcher, type of thing, because he's so long. It's
Absolutely.
a totally different construct. And
when Bingham comes in, he's fresh.
Yeah, and he was
the key.
He was fantastic tonight.
People are asking me, why isn't Bingham starting? Why isn't Bingham starting? Just watch what they're doing. They put Marble on Coburn early in the game, or on this guy early in the game, and let Marble hang on him. Let him get all that wrestling energy on, and let Dickinson, drag him up and down the court for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then Bingham comes in rested, maybe beginning against what's the big guy's name, the second stringer, 51,
Austin
Davis. Yeah, so he goes up against him for a while, but then Bingham, he played fresh, partly because like Izzo says, some guys when they start, they expend a lot of energy. The first time Marble started earlier this year, Izzo said he was done after 2 minutes. Well, Marble's gotten a little more accustomed to that, so Bingham can relax early in the game, come in fresh, get a rhythm going. And he's played well that way. I mean, Bingham ends up playing,
23 minutes,
24 minutes, and Marble plays 12. People are like, well, how come Marble's starting? Look at the minutes. It's 24 to 12. It's like in baseball these days when people have have an opener. They don't have a starting pitcher. They've got an opener, and then the middle relief and the closer has become more and more important.
Well, in the
Marble's a starter, but he's an opener, and it helps Bingham play better throughout the course of the game. I think it's great.
And the other thing people don't realize, and they need to, is that if look at the games where Bingham starts, he picks up fouls like
Yes,
crazy.
this is
And
good.
and,
This
and
is a
this
good
is
way to
something
do it.
that Tom Izzo's done for years. If a guy has foul trouble issues, and they're looking for those type of things, and early in the game they're looking for everything. They're looking for the screen stuff. You're going to get the ticky tack stuff on post entries. If a guy struggles with getting fouls early and gets frustrated because of it, Bingham often gets frustrated, and the body language gets bad when he picks up those quick fouls that he doesn't agree with. Bring him off the bench. It's the easiest thing you can do. I mean, he did the same thing with Joey Hauser earlier this year when Joey Hauser was picking up fouls left and right early. It's a good thing to do, and yeah, and I agree with you. It's the same thing that goes back to the whole Kithier argument. People are saying, "Oh, well, they lost the game because Uh, Kithier played. So he started. Well, they lost it because he played nine minutes. It doesn't make sense. Look at the minute total. Stop looking at the asterisk by the name that says he's a starter.
Absolutely. And they're getting good play out of that position now defensively. And Bingham, I mean, loose balls, rebounds, deflections, quick to the ball. He is a factor now. So you get in a situation now where, some of the better Izzo teams, it's hard to do this and you don't set out to do this. But in some ways, when they go to the bench, they can become better because they're a better team with Bingham on the floor. Now, Brown, did some good things with the rebounding and the free throws late. Didn't have his best game today, but he's had good days in the past. He's coming off the bench too. There are given days when Michigan State might go to the bench and Brown and Bingham come in and they're better. Maybe not against everybody, but that is something that opposing teams have to contend with, and that part of it continues to grow.
Yeah, and I think you look at a guy like Gabe Brown, and
And Hauser.
if Michigan State can get back to the running game, I mean, if they can get fresh and they can start like running a little bit, that's where I think Brown is a real weapon because he's got that quick trigger and he shoots very very well in transition, and that's something that can really make him a big time asset in this offense. So Michigan State, I thought Michigan State they didn't get a lot of transition buckets tonight, but I thought they were fresh enough to actually put a little bit of pressure on Michigan running just a little bit.
Sure. And I didn't see it. 17, but apparently I think Juwan Howard said something about the free throw disparity being 23-11. I mean, it's actually 17-11 because Michigan State's last 6 free throws were in the last 45 seconds when Michigan put them on the line. So
Yeah, and
it's
I
17
think
to 11.
you want to look at like how it was done. Michigan State did a lot of their driving. I mean, they were the one that they were being aggressive. Rocket Watts when he's putting the ball on the floor, Aaron Henry when he's putting the ball on the floor, and you're driving. Guess what? You're gonna get fouls called on you. And I thought I thought there was a lot of times where Michigan could have been called for fouls that weren't. On some of those drives, those transition layup attempts in the beginning. I thought Michigan settled for more shots than Michigan State did tonight, and I thought Michigan State played much better defense. I think lots of times when you have a disparity situation, it's because the one team is more aggressive than the other, and Michigan State was more aggressive.
And I think Michigan State actually was called for more fouls than Michigan was. 18 to 7 to whatever it is, 18 to 15. Anyway, as this game developed, um, Hauser, big lift in that first half, aggressive, driving, scoring with some creativity. And, sometimes when he's put the ball on the deck, he's been a turnover machine.
Yeah.
Whenever he starts to dribble, there's been turnovers. Today, did you notice when he put the ball on the deck, he was driving with more authority? He wasn't waiting as much. I wonder if that was a self-scout thing where they self-corrected on that one.
I think there's more room there too. I mean, in some of these games where Michigan State hasn't had shooting threats or scoring threats out there, I think that Michigan's defenders were honoring Michigan State's 3-point or perimeter scoring threats a little bit more than maybe some of the other teams. Where
Yeah, so the drive was there. Yeah.
where Hauser's been in trouble has been against teams that really collapse it in and dare Michigan State to shoot.
It's a great point.
I'm thinking of the Purdue's and that type of thing where
Yeah.
there's not a lot of driving lanes in there.
That's a great point. Why would Michigan be playing out on three-point shooting? Michigan State was 0 for 9 from three-point range on Tuesday. They're not a really good three-point shooting team, but you're right. Michigan State had room to drive today.
To me, if I'm playing Michigan State, I'm going to make them beat me with a 3-ball. I mean, that's what I would do, because, and I know they've got guys that are capable of shooting, but to me, I think that's the weakness of Michigan State a little bit is that that you could dare them to shoot in a lot of instances. But yeah, there were driving lanes there that we haven't seen earlier.
Rocket Watts, 8 out of 16 from the field. Something we talked about earlier in the week when I was watching Michigan this week. I mean, Michigan's been great all year and all that, but the one weakness I thought they had was ball screen defense, just a basic point guard, high screen. Their center Dickinson kind of shacks it. He gives you a lot of room coming off that ball screen. I'm surprised the teams with good point guards haven't really hurt them more this year. Maybe there's decent point guards in the Big Ten. I just didn't know if Michigan State had the point guard to make them pay. And I wrote that earlier in the week. I'm like, there are windows for ball screen, one dribble, pull up jumper for a point guard. Rocket Watts is going to have windows, I said in the first game. And Rocket Watts actually shot more in that game than he has in other games. Had a couple of creative plays, made a couple here and there. And of course, the famous failure to get on the floor for the loose ball. But there were shot windows there. So they lose the game, they come back, they look at film. And you know how Izzo is. He has to believe in his guys, and he does believe in his guys, but he wants to pump confidence into them. I'm sure that Izzo showed them film and said, Rocket, look, you're going to have an opening here. This is your day. It's your game. You are going to make these shots. You're going to be a difference. Be prepared to take these shots and make these shots. Now, sometimes he'll pull, he'll shoot something in transition, 1-on-4, and Izzo's not really crazy about that. But there's a difference when you have a ball screen and a little window of opportunity. He wanted to let him know he had the green light. That had to have been what happened because he had the green light, went hunting for it earlier. And right there, that window we talked about earlier in the week that is there against Michigan. Watts was going to have those shots. And Big Mooby, shout out to him. He said earlier today that Watts was going to have a good game. And I said, it's possible because the windows are there. Not sure if he's going to make them or not, but he's done it in the past. 21 points against U of D earlier in the year, 20 against Duke. You mentioned last year, what do you have? 21 against Ohio State, 19 against Illinois.
19 against Ohio State, 21 against Illinois.
It's been few and far between, but he has that capacity. Today, the capacity hit when Michigan State had to have it, and it's a big win. And the series, the series rivalry with Michigan, they've been playing this game, last game of the season, the last few years, and each game has been mammoth. This one, mammoth. Last year, Michigan State getting a share of the Big Ten title, Cassius Winston Senior Day, a year ago, basically today, amazing.
Yeah, and then 2 years ago, 2 years before that, I mean, Michigan State winning the Big Ten regular season championship. I mean, in the Big Ten championship, the Big Ten tournament championship with wins over Michigan.
Yeah, that game, both Michigan and Michigan State's first time, I think the only time that they were both ranked in the top 10. And that was considered the biggest game in the history of the Breslin Center. 2 years ago, last game of the season here, Michigan State won that one. And like you said, won the Big Ten tournament against Michigan a week later and then went to the Final Four. But this series, this one's different. Michigan just clinched a Big Ten title a few days ago, but Michigan State needing to get a win to get into the NCAA tournament to maintain a 23-year streak. NCAA tournament pretty much cinched, I would have to think now. And Izzo said he felt like, the weight of the world was off his shoulders a little bit, wiped a tear from his eye after the game on the sideline. Izzo said he never wanted to talk about the importance of the streak because he didn't want to put extra pressure on his players, but the pressure was there. And when I was, against Illinois, I kind of felt it. I don't know if it was all in my head or not.
No, everybody felt it.
It felt like it. I mean, it to me, it felt like a regional final. It felt like the game you need to win to go to the Final Four.
Yeah, and I felt the same way with Ohio State. Like you're sitting there because you feel it when you're walking around. I mean, we're not in a hotel room or anything like that, so you're not sitting there in front of the TV ironing clothes or whatever. But it felt like you're walking around getting ready to go, and I was probably a little bit grouchier of the family than I would normally be or whatever. Those days, but these have felt like really big games. And today, Josh Langford mentioned how hard it's been. Like some of these games, players are always talking about, hey, that's why we come to Michigan State. But the amount of pressure, the immense amount of pressure that they felt all season long, and then during the last month is pretty incredible. And the fact that they were able to negotiate that pressure and find a way to win. The Illinois game, that was great and all, but that just raised the stakes. And the Ohio State game was kind of the real grinder, the gritty grinder of it, because that was just one of those games where they didn't have it. They were on fumes, but they found a way to win. Same thing with the second Indiana game. And then, this game, it felt like they're just a little bit more fresh, but
they were one day fresher. I mean, that's not much, but for this team is
right.
Gasping for air like they were, the one day of 24 hours of oxygen helped.
So now you wonder, like, does some of that pressure come off because and where can they go with that? And it'll be interesting to see. That's why I wonder if there's some similarities between this team and that Denzel Valentine team when he was a junior.
Yes. And, people have made that comparison with Travis Trice. He was always a good player, but he really kicked it into a different level in the NCAA tournament his senior year. I think that was one of the years when they beat
Yeah,
Virginia.
but
Um,
I'm not ever sure that I'm not sure that, like, when he went to the Final Four, that was the same year that I'm talking about with Valentine as a junior. But I'm not sure I ever felt like Travis Trice couldn't play point guard.
right, right.
There were some times where, like, okay, he's a little bit undersized. He might not be great on defense. He might not be an ideal Michigan State point guard. But there was not times where I ever said, well, he flat out has struggles to run the point, or he has no business running the point. And
You know,
that's to me the biggest question mark
I,
between, with what Michigan State's got going on a point guard.
they're still under construction.
Yeah,
And Izzo, he's trying to pump confidence into these guys. Told them after the game that you guys are battle tested. Are they
they
worn
are.
out? They're probably worn out a little bit, but now they get a breather. And will they come back with even more energy now? But battle tested, 15-11 record. But as battle tested is some of his championship teams, the conference Big Ten championship teams. What they've done in the last, winning 5-2 with these stakes. He's had Big Ten championship teams that didn't win as many pressure games as this team has down the stretch. Battle
Yeah,
tested. Now also Watts, point guard, that's back on the plate again. The last game against Michigan on Tuesday, they started Hogard at the point, correct?
right.
So they're still figuring that out, and everybody knows Aaron Henry's played a lot of point guard late in games, but it's not. Izzo has had some teams that have made some nice runs that were making big changes or getting major blip development late in the season from freshmen or sophomores. It happens. I mean, look at 2009 when they made the Final Four. Um, Draymond Green had not played that huge a role that year. Remember? He was starting to play more and more midway through the year. And maybe in January is when he started playing more. And then, coming off the bench was obviously one of their better players. But the Draymond Green that you saw in March when they were, when they beat Louisville, they beat Kansas in the Sweet 16. I think it was that year. Beat USC in the second round. Draymond Green played big. That's not the same Draymond Green you saw even like January 10th of that year. Even Xavier Tillman, the year that Nick Ward hurt his hand, Xavier Tillman took on a different role. Kenny Goins has taken on a big role. Remember late in the year?
Right.
That was later in his career. But even all the way back when they made that surprise run in 2003 to the Elite Eight, when, Erasm Lorbeck all of a sudden, boom, now he's a freshman. But even, Maurice Ager and Paul Davis, they were just kind of feeling their way all season. But all three of those guys elevated late and carried them. They went to the Elite Eight. Now you're looking at Rocket Watts, Marcus Bingham. Sometimes in this program, guys, they make a big splash in March, but we forget that Draymond Green wasn't that much of a player when he earlier in his sophomore year. It happens for some reason. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but Rocket Watts, like you wrote in your 3-2-1, is it possible you can get something like this on a regular basis? If
Yeah.
so, that changes a lot. Changes a
Yeah.
lot, Paul.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends on why you're not getting it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, some of it is it the pressure that he's putting on himself? I mean, is there like this burden that he's putting on himself, and was there released tonight? So I don't know. Some of it,
I think that he's just still trying to read things like when do I hit the accelerator, when do I pump the brakes. It's like
yeah,
he just try, he's buying into what Izzo says that in order to be a complete winning guard the way we need it, you need to be able to read these hieroglyphics a little bit better and see when it's time to go and when it's not time to go. He had a couple shots today when he didn't, but and his offense on the pull-up game, I tell you what, 5 weeks ago he might have been driving that all the way into the lane and throwing up some one-handed teardrop and missing. But
yeah.
that pull-up 16-footer, Kalen Lucas style, that's not bad. And like Izzo says, they want to start running. I don't know if they've got the legs to do that. I don't know if they've got the depth in the backcourt to do that. But if they catch somebody in the NCAA tournament that doesn't realize how well they can run, that might be something they get to work on here this week before the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I think some of it too with him is I do think there's been a lot of pressure, and I think tonight that can help out a lot. Just the pressure. But I want to see if this gives him the confidence to play that lockdown defense that we saw from
Yeah.
him that last time this year. I know it's there within him, and there's been kind of like maybe just playing point guard. Maybe there's a lot on his plate, and it's like the mental fatigue of it. But I do think that he played some decent defense tonight. And when he's playing with confidence, he does play good defense. He did it against Illinois. I felt like he did it
Mm-hmm.
against Illinois earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
If he can play good defense, and they're getting good defense from Aaron Henry, because I thought Aaron Henry, in addition to scoring some really big buckets tonight, he played some great defense tonight.
Played livers a lot against
Whether he
livers.
was matched up on Livers or on Wagner. I mean, Michigan's a tricky team to defend, and And I think one of the reasons why Langford struggled, they made it awfully hard for him to get off of screens and that type of thing. And Eli Brooks, before he got injured, I mean, there is a lot of clutching and grabbing going on, and some of that is just a point of emphasis on what officials are looking at. But Langford had to work for every opening that he got, and that's not easy.
All right, man. Huge win. It was amazing to watch this, and there were a few fans here, players, parents, friends of the program, a few, but they stayed around and gave Izzo a big hand as he left the court for the last time, and got to feel good for Tom Izzo too. He never stopped working with his team, and I mean, it seems like he has terrible circumstances to deal with every single year, different challenges. This one, I mean, of all the comebacks that his teams have made over the years, this one was against the steepest of circumstances, the most unlikely of circumstances. And I tell you what, Paul, um, late in the first half against Indiana at Indiana in Bloomington, it started to look different. And you were out of town that weekend, and I called Nils Deco. I said, Nils, we're doing a podcast tonight because something sparked tonight. And if you go back and listen to that podcast, I was I was a little unprofessional, but there was a chance that something had been planted that night. Something had turned a corner, and it turned out that was the case. Wasn't I wasn't predicting it, but at that time we mapped out what could they do if they went 3-3 and won two Big Ten games, Big Ten title games, that Big Ten tournament games, that would get them in 4-2. Was that possible? The only way I thought that was possible was split against Ohio State and Illinois, split against Michigan, and win those two against Indiana and Maryland. I knew the Maryland one would be difficult, but splitting against Michigan, we said in the podcast 2 weeks ago, was possible just because of the psychology of sports. Beating it, sweeping a team, like if Michigan to sweep a team, it's just hard to do. You see it in college hockey every weekend. It's really hard to sweep, and Michigan just won the conference championship. And like Liver said, Michigan State came out today and wanted it more, and wanted it for good reason. That was part of the DNA of the program, clutching and scratching and clawing to get into the NCAA tournament. That was the program that the Michigan Wolverines were playing against today, and it showed up, and all that psychology worked to Michigan State's favor, and they got that split, like we said 2 weeks ago, that they could, to go 4-2, 5-2 in the last seven. And it's an amazing run for Izzo and these guys, Henry and Langford. Feel good for those guys, and the energy and the effort they put out. I've got such respect for those guys, and good for them.
Yeah, and I've said this before, but I would feel terrible knowing how good of guys and good of human beings they are and how good they've been for the program. To see the streak end on their watch,
Mm-hmm.
and to see some of the accomplishments that they've had this year, not bear fruit as far as the NCAA tournament goes. So it's I feel awesome for those guys, and what I don't know where their accomplishments will rank, because sometimes when you don't hang banners, people don't remember these type of things. But I'll always remember it because what they've done in the last 2 weeks seemed at points throughout the season impossible, and to do it in a year, where the Big Ten has been as good as they have, is really really impressive.
And the interruptions. They haven't had the practices that Izzo would normally have. That's one of the reasons they were behind in a lot of ways. But they're getting them in now and battle tested through a difficult schedule. We'll see what happens in Indianapolis against Maryland on Thursday, and see if there's a rematch on Friday. Basketball season still alive and thriving, with people noticing Michigan State again in the month of March, Paul Konyndyk.
You don't want to bet against them this time of year, that's for sure.
No. Anything else, Paul?
No.
All right. Very happy for the Michigan State fans out there. It's been a tough school year in a lot of ways. This was the high water mark of the year, of the school year for Michigan State athletics. To get back into the tournament, I'm guessing, and keep that string alive, a very important string, fourth longest streak in college basketball history. If Duke does not make it, Michigan State might be able to overtake them in 2 years. Michigan State trying to make it 23 straight years this year. North Carolina had 27 straight years. It's a long way to look ahead, but is it possible for Michigan State to overtake North Carolina and have the second longest streak in history? No one's catching no one's catching Kansas. The only thing that was going to stop Kansas was maybe NCAA probation. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But they've got 7 banners over here, and they won't have one for the second longest NCAA tournament streak in history. But Gonzaga's on their heels, but with 22 straight. But in terms of major conference teams, it could be Kansas 1 and Michigan State 2nd. That would be a major linchpin for this program as a blue blood for history if it turns out that way. If they get in this year, and Duke doesn't, some of those things that are on the table. That's why this game was so important to get in. And oh, by the way, they got in through the most difficult circumstances. 3 victories over top 5 teams, which makes you stop and think, well, wait a minute, how many more can they win? NCAA tournament, we'll see what that looks like. A week from today, and when the brackets come out, and when that happens, like you said before, I think we talked about this after the Ohio State game. I wouldn't want to play Michigan State. Michigan State, if they win their first game in the NCAA tournament, then you get back to Tom Izzo 1-day prep, and this team knows what 1-day preps are all about. It's not a complete team, but winning 1 game and winning 2 games, there's not a big difference. And who knows? In 2 weeks, Paul Konyndyk, 3 weeks, we might be talking Sweet 16 again. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's all possible right now.
Absolutely.
All right. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. The last game of the year in Breslin. Next year, we hope to see you people in here and not these cutouts. Some of these cutouts are people that are subscribers like yourselves. It's been an interesting year, a taxing year, a difficult year, an emotional year, a strenuous year. But we've gotten through it, I think, as observers. And the Michigan State basketball Spartans march on. 15 wins, 3 wins over top 5 opponents in the last 12 days. Probably going dancing again. So everybody enjoy your dance, and we'll be here to cover it as we move forward from East Lansing today. And in the future, who knows where we'll be, SpartanMag.com.